The world scarred by war now stands divided. Two superpowers rise, one championing freedom, the other equality. But beneath the surface, a new war brews, a war fought not with bullets, but with fear, propaganda, and shadows. This is the Cold War. Democracy versus dictatorship. The battle begins. Not on battlefields, but in the shadows. The war was fought in whispers, in backrooms, in coded messages sent between spies.
In Washington, the gravest international crisis since the war flares into the open. President Truman drives to the Capitol to report to an extraordinary session of both houses of Congress on the growing problems in Greece and Turkey.
The foreign policy and the national security of this country are involved. One aspect of the present situation, which I present to you at this time for your consideration and decision, concerns Greece and Turkey.
Halfway around the world are the two countries to which the President refers, Greece and Turkey, in the shadow of the Iron Curtain. Here, strategic, economic, and humanitarian issues draw the attention of America. Greece, ancient cradle of democracy, last Western outpost in the Balkans, is today bare of resources. Since 1940, when they repelled Mussolini's invasion and then fought bravely against Hitler's Wehrmacht, the Greeks have been among the war's worst victims. Liberation in 1944 from a cruel occupation by the Nazis was met with wild joy. Yet even this happiness was short-lived, for behind these scenes of greeting to British troops, Greece had become a land of conflict, terrorized by armed bands of royalists and communists. Relief was slow or did not come at all. 85% of the children were tubercular. Thousands of Greeks continued to die for lack of food. In 2 months, the fierce political division between the right and left flamed into civil war. With British military force, an uneasy peace was finally enforced. Elections boycotted by the leftist parties gave the majority of seats in the Assembly to the Royalists. A plebiscite last September recalled King George from London. The king's return brought no end to the difficulties in Greece. Observers claimed that collaborators, profiteers, and corrupt job holders were sheltered behind an indecisive government. Others claimed that behind the communists were terrorists and provocateurs from neighbor states. Above all was the basic poverty of the little country. Thousands looked for garbage to eat. Profiteering on the sale of food and supplies increased the misery. Inflation soared out of control. 100 million drachmas might buy a loaf of bread.
Must have assistance if it is to become a self-supporting and self-respecting democracy. The United States must supply this assistance. We have already extended to Greece certain types of relief and economic aid, but these are inadequate. There is no other country to which democratic Greece can turn. No other nation is willing and able to provide the necessary support for a democratic Greek government. One of the primary objectives of the foreign policy of the United States is the creation of conditions in which we and other nations will be able to work out a way of life free from coercion.
The Cold War was never just about two superpowers. It spread like wildfire, igniting conflicts in every corner of the world. From the desert of the Middle East to the mountain of South Asia, alliances were formed, wars were waged, and nations were left scarred. In Latin America, communist revolutions threatened US influence. In Africa, foreign interests backed military corps. In Asia, war became the currency of power.
President Truman announced the official surrender.
This is a solemn but glorious hour. I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe. For this victory, we join in offering our thanks to the Providence which has guided and sustained us through the dark days of adversity and into life. Much remains to be done. The victory won in the West must now be won in the East. The whole world must be cleansed of the evil from which half the world has been free. United, the peace-loving nations have demonstrated in the West that their arms are stronger by far than the might of dictators or the tyranny of military cliques that once called us soft and weak. The power of our peoples to defend themselves against all enemies will be proved in the Pacific War as it was proved in Europe.
In the Middle East, the Cold War turned nations into battlegrounds. The US armed Israel while the Soviets fueled Arab states. Espionage, secret deals and betrayals dictated the fate of millions. Mossad, the KGB, the CIA all played their deadly games, making allies and enemies in the shadows. From the Six-Day War to the Yom Kippur War, global superpowers pulled the strings while the people have to pay the price. And in the midst of it all, the Israel-Palestine conflict burned hotter than ever. Across the world, another deadly rivalry took shape. Born from the ashes of partition, India and Pakistan became the pawns in a greater game. The US backed Pakistan while India found an ally in the Soviet Union. The stakes? Nuclear dominance, territorial control, and the fate of Kashmir. Behind the curtain, intelligence agencies waged their silent war.
By the late 1980s, the Soviet economy crumbled. Protests erupted, the Berlin Wall fell, and then the final blow, December 26, 1991. The Soviet Union was no more. The Iron Curtain had lifted, and the world watched the dawn of a new era.
And your untiring response brought us, in the end, victory over Germany. Today, we still have tears. Not so many, thank God. But the conquest of Japan, hand in hand with our American allies, is a formidable undertaking which we must and will see through to the end. And we must still look forward, alas, to blood and sweat. We have a terrific task ahead of us. We have a shattered world around us, and we must help to rebuild it.
The Cold War may have ended, but its shadows still shape our world. The battles continue in boardrooms, in cyberspace, in the halls of power. The game never stops. History is not just remembered, it is repeated.
Я покидаю свой пост с тревогой, но и с надеждой, с верой в вас, в вашу мудрость и силу духа. Мы наследники великой цивилизации, и сейчас от всех и каждого зависит, чтобы она возродилась к новой, современной и достойной жизни.